Let me ask you the same question I asked the second day of the session. Do we have a structural deficit?
Yes, sir. I think the amount, as I was talking with Senator Zaffarini about, the amount of dollars required to do the property tax compression, there is not enough new dollars flowing in from the increase in the franchise tax and the dollar pack on cigarettes to pay for that reduction.
Is it a $5 billion per year structural deficit?
As
you said the second day of the session?
Sir. Yes, sir. I went back and looked at this, and for 8 and 9, which is the last period I have, my calculation is that for that 2-year budget cycle, we have $9.2 billion.
Deficit. Short.
Yes. Short of paying for the compression.
That's what some people define as a structural deficit.
And I will freely acknowledge that probably there could be multiple definitions of what that might be.
And that's a good point, too.
Senator Williams.
Thank you. And would it be fair to say, Mr. Heleman, that in our budgeting process, whatever that shortfall is, we settle that up at the end of every biennium, correct?
I think it would be.
We've got to operate on a cash basis, right, more or less.
I think it would be fair to say, Senator Williams, that the way the budget was constructed in 2009 is a different question than what Senator Shapiro and Senator Whitmire are asking.
Right. And do we go back, or are we now saying, do we have a structural deficit in the current biennium because the sales tax is less than we thought it was going to be when we wrote the budget in 2008 and 2009? Are we doing that? Is that part of a structural deficit?
I have not heard that, sir.
Okay. Well, I mean, my point for the committee is, no, it's not performing exactly like we thought it was, but none of the revenue sources that we ever collect are exactly the way we project they're going to be, just like school enrollment and Medicaid caseload growth, and all those things are not the same. And so we wrote a balanced budget last time with the new revenue estimate, and this is not some big deficit that's accumulating out there. It's settled up at the end of every biennium when we write our budget. And so is it performing the way we thought it would when we passed it? No. It's not. I freely admit that. But it's not some giant hole that's gaping out there that we're about to step off into.
But Senator Williams, you've been in meetings that I've been in, and the leadership came up with that concept. I've been here 100 years, and it's only in the last year that that's been used because it's a reality based on our briefings from the leadership.
With all due respect, Senator Williams, I do believe we did create a structural, ongoing revenue deficit when we passed the school finance reform package. Well, with all due respect, Senator Williams, when we passed it, I believe I was told at the time it was $2 billion short when we passed it. There was going to be an ongoing, I believe Governor Dewhurst told us that there was going to be an ongoing $2 billion deficit when we passed it, and we were hoping we would grow out of it with the economy. It's understandable. The economy didn't deliver like we thought it would, and we obviously went the other direction. The gross receipts tax is short, as you stated, by about $1.5 billion, $2 billion from the original projections. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we have to look at both sides of the ledger. You just can't look at what the revenue didn't deliver. You have to look at the payments you have to make to deliver the property tax cuts that we put in place. Correct?
Yes, sir, if I understand your statement.
Okay. So when you look at both sides of the ledger, it's an ongoing structural deficit in revenue. If you forget the rest of the state budget, if we just had this perfect little world and we had just this, all we had to deal with was this school finance reform package, and we had to pay these tax cuts, and we had to bring in certain revenue to pay for them, what would be the deficit over a 2-year period? If that's all we dealt with, what would that be?
As a way of answering your question, Senator Eltife, my recollection is that when the bill was passed 5 years ago, you were right in the sense of an ongoing property tax rate compression. It was short $4 to $5 billion a year from actually being paid for. What's happened here is that adding to that, which was already present 5 years ago, is the franchise tax has not performed as expected. And so we've gone from that to, as I mentioned earlier, in 8 and 9, it looked like to me we were perhaps $9.2 billion short.
Are you familiar with the S&P report that S&P put out? Have the Comptroller's Office read that report?
I read many of the reports. I'm not sure which one this is.
The most recent one, about a week or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
Did you read that one?
I don't believe I did.
Okay. Well, it talks in there about a structural deficit that the state has created. And, you know, I do believe, with all due respect, Senator Williams, you're right. We can balance it every session. I get that. But we also put in place a finance reform package for public education that did not balance. And now it is part of the problem. We just have to deal with it. Thank you.
And I would just add, with all due respect to Senator Eltife, that there are those of us who voted for that, knowing that that was true, because that's what I call a tax cut. Okay, we cut taxes by doing it that way.
And with all due respect to Senator Williams, I did not vote for it because I knew it was not going to work. It has not delivered the true tax cuts to the businesses that were promised. They were told it would be a wash, and it hasn't. Some businesses don't even have income pay tax. The tax cuts have not been delivered as promised. To the third tax cuts that were promoted to people, that was never going to happen in the first place, because if you look at your tax bill, the school taxes are only 60%, and we capped the school district's hands on raising revenue. I call it the trifecta disaster. It did not work, and it would be nice if every now and then in the building we would admit we made a mistake and fix it. Thank you.